Pennsylvania, home to the city of brotherly love and the brotherly shove. The great American steelworkers. The Poconos. But why are so many people leaving the state and heading down south, specifically finding home right here in South Carolina? Well, whether it's the cold winters, the taxes, rising costs of homes, or so many other reasons, I've personally helped a lot of people relocate right here to South Carolina from Pennsylvania specifically. And that's why in this video, we're gonna compare Pennsylvania versus South Carolina. Maybe it's on your list of considerations. Specifically, we're gonna be breaking down parts where I am, in the Midlands of South Carolina, Columbia, Lexington, and Lake Murray. But of course, some of this will be relative to the entire state. We're gonna be breaking down the weather, and of course, natural disasters, cost of living, including taxes, childcare, housing in our area, and so much more. And a bonus that you don't wanna miss. One of the biggest things that I hear draws people specifically to our area. Now, let me be honest, for reference, I've personally never been to Pennsylvania. I know, it's on our list to visit, and as we talk about weather, it will probably be during the summer. So most of this is coming from simply the perspective of talking to people just like you every week that are considering the move, or those that have already made the move down here from Pennsylvania. And of course, I researched tons of different sites to make sure statistically I was being accurate versus just opinions. But I've personally been able to help buyers from the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Scranton, the Poconos, and more. But again, let's start with statistically where people are relocating from to South Carolina and where statistically those in Pennsylvania are typically moving to. So according to Smart Asset, the top states people are relocating to South Carolina from are number 1 is going to be New York. Number 2, our neighboring state of North Carolina. 3 is New Jersey, and number 4 on the list is Pennsylvania. And according to Redfin, more than 3,000 people were actually searching to move out of Pennsylvania versus the amount of people searching to move into Pennsylvania. And for reference, South Carolina on the same site comes in with 8,000 more people searching to move in versus out. Hence the reason we are constantly seeing this population gain year over year. So this isn't just my personal opinion. Statistically, it is true. And you may, again, be one of those people looking to move out. So let's dive into this a little bit more. Now let's break down further to see what metros most people are coming to when they're moving to South Carolina to see if yours lands in there. Number 1 is gonna be Los Angeles, the metro I actually originally moved from back in 2015. Number 2 is New York, New York. 3 is San Francisco, 4 is Seattle, 5 is Washington, D.C., 6 is Chicago, Illinois, and number 7 is Philadelphia, PA. So leave a comment if you are one of those in the Philly metro considering moving. Now, we do know that many of you are considering a few states. A lot of you tell me that there's a couple states on your list. But let's see statistically where people in PA are actually tending to land on the list. So the number 1 they move to is Sacramento, California. Now, maybe this is a temporary stop before they come here based on the last statistic, knowing that we get people from California. Either way, 2, Cape Coral, Florida. 3 is actually gonna be Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. 4, Salisbury, Maryland. 5, Portland, Maine. 6, Las Vegas, Nevada. 7, Sarasota, Florida. And 8, Phoenix, Arizona. 9, Nashville, Tennessee. And 10, Hilo, Hawaii. Guess they were really done with the cold and had some deep pockets to move. Either way, with that said, for those of you that are considering Florida, because obviously there are multiple destinations in Florida that land on that list, if you haven't had a chance, check out my Florida versus South Carolina video. One of the big things I cover in that is the fact that we have what we like to call halfbacks. A lot of people I've had that started up north, whether it was Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, or many of the others, moved down to Florida, and a few years later came halfway back up, finding home right here in South Carolina. So you want to check that video out first if Florida is on your list, because there's a lot that they informed me about that pushed them out of Florida, outside of the obvious of just the hurricanes. Now, I'm just curious, what other destinations are on your list that you may be considering outside of South Carolina that weren't on that list? Leave a comment below so we can see where people are considering. Now, circling back around, it seems that in Pennsylvania specifically, more people are considering Myrtle Beach than per se any other area around South Carolina. Now, I recently did a video comparing Myrtle Beach to Columbia. Of course, I know so many people are seeking retirement near the beach, but many have decided to flock back here to the Midlands after realizing the challenges of a tourist town, the traffic that comes along with it, and their rising prices as well. But either way, when it comes to the Columbia metro area specifically, and of course later on we will dive into statistics about the cost of living in much of those suburbs you asked me about, Lexington, Lake Murray, Irmo, Chapin, Blythewood, Elgin, and so many more. But number 8, Columbia area specifically, where people are coming from, is Philadelphia, PA. I feel like I've personally seen more Steeler flags than Philly flags, but anyways, let's get into the important things that you ask me about most. Oh, and for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Brandon. My team and I of local real estate agents have truly been helping people from all over the country relocate right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, the Lexington, Columbia, and Lake Murray area. So don't hesitate to reach out. That way you don't have to go at this alone. So let's dive into weather. This is probably one of the biggest things I hear outside of course cost of living, which we will hit next, followed by the bonuses. Many people from up north are seeking milder winters. They're simply tired of shoveling the snow and dealing with the frigid temperatures. I get it. So let's give the basics of the area, and then of course we have to touch on natural disasters because that's always one of the big questions people ask. How bad are they really in your area? So according to weatherspark.com, in Columbia specifically, the summers are considered hot and muggy. The winters are cold and it's wet and partly cloudy year round. Over the course of the year, the temperatures typically vary from 36 to 92 degrees. It is rarely below 23, but does happen, or above 98 degrees. The hot season, the one most of you worry about the most, it lasts for 3.7 months, from May 24th to September 15th, with an average daily high temperature above 85 degrees. The hottest month of the year, for those that are like, hey, when can I visit to really see if I can hang in this heat, is considered July, with an average high of 92 and a low of 73. I've always said it doesn't feel like it cools down at night. The cool season lasts for 3 months, from November 28th to February 26th, with an average daily high temperature below 63. Doesn't sound that bad compared to what y'all have to deal with. The coldest month of the year in Columbia is January, with an average low of 37 and a high of 56 degrees. As you can see, all that in between, that spring and fall, is relatively mild, and I know people love that, including myself. Now, you know your weather, and of course, each area of Pennsylvania is going to be slightly different. But let me give you the overall state statistical averages so you can at least compare to what I just gave you. So Philly, for reference, to give kind of different region, ranges between an average low of 27 up to an average high of 86. Pittsburgh low is 24 and a high of 83. These are kind of the extremes on both ends versus I broke down ours the summer and the winter. Again, you got to look at your own weather. Erie low of 23 and a high of 79, and Scranton low of 21 and a high of 82. So much cooler up there, and our summers are much more hotter. Now, with that said, Columbia, South Carolina gets 46 inches of rain on average per year. To give you an idea, the US averages 38 inches of rain per year, which is actually the lowest of the state for those considering other parts. The coastal areas receive on average 50 to 60 inches of rain annually, and the Piedmont, which for reference is heading up towards Greenville in the mountain, receives around 70 to 80 inches of rain annually. Now, Pennsylvania, of course, different region, ranges from 34 inches to 52 inches, with most areas receiving between 38 and 46 inches. So it's still a decent amount of rain up there. Now, with that said, even with the high amount of rain we have, this is an interesting fact as well. On average, there are 217 sunny days per year in Columbia. To give you an idea, the US averages 205 sunny days. So we have more sunny days on average, even though we have more rain. It just comes down in heavy amounts. Circling back, Pennsylvania has an average of 179 days per year. So they have fewer sunny days than the national average. So you'll get more sunny days, even though you might get some more rain. Now, the one thing that I know most of you will love, Columbia averages 1 inch of snow per year. The US average, which surprised me, is actually 28 inches of snow per year. I'm assuming some of these areas are pulling up all the other southern states that we don't really see snow that often, but either way, I have seen snow flurries just about every year I've been here, but since we've been here in 2015, I have only seen it stuck twice. And that would have been this current year that we're sitting in. This January we got some snow, and then back, I believe 2022, we had snow that stuck. Prior to that, we hadn't seen it stick. So even though the inch is average, it's spread out over years where we might get 1 to 2 inches one year and 0 the next. Either way, Pennsylvania, as you all know, more snowfall than we have, around 39 inches, and it's a wide range. Philly with 21.7 inches. Up in State College, it's 45.9 inches. Now, of course, the big fear, even when it comes to the heat in the summer, is humidity. So in Columbia, the muggier period of the year lasts for 4.7 months, from May 16th to October 8th, during which time the comfort level is muggy, oppressive, or miserable at least 23% of the time. 23 ain't that bad. You're not passing at that point in high school. The month with the most muggy days in Columbia is July, with 27 days that are muggy or worse. So again, hottest and most muggy. So if you're really trying to test, can you hang? That's the month to come. And I tell people all the time, because they always ask, how bad is it really? Because I came from the West Coast, very dry state. I always tell people it depends on your job. Yeah, back when I was an EMT working on the ambulance when we first moved here, we had a traffic accident on the side of the road in the middle of summer and we had our brush jackets on. You were pouring sweat and the air conditioner didn't feel cool enough. Now I live in an air conditioner vehicle here in my office and so many other places, so it's really not that bad. So it just depends on the job that you work. That's just my perspective. But either way, the month with the fewest muggy days in Columbia is February, with 0.1 days that are muggy or worse. Tends to get dry still here in the winter. Now, I pulled Philly for this one since obviously it's the most popular area people are coming from. The muggier period of the year lasts for 4 months is what it says, from May 29th to September 27, during which time of the comfort level is muggy, oppressive, or miserable at least 14% of the time. So less than we are. The month with most muggy days in Philadelphia is July, with 16.6 days that are muggy or worse. The month with the fewest in Philly is February, with 0 days that are muggy or worse. So y'all still get that humidity, it's just not as bad and not as often. Now, of course, outside of the humidity that everybody asks about, the next thing they always ask about is natural disasters. So let's dive into it. So according to dnr.sc.gov, from 1851 to 2021, 44 tropical cyclones have made landfall along the South Carolina coast. I need to update that because obviously we had Helene that came through our area that did quite a bit, mostly to North Carolina, as we've seen on the news in so much more. But of course, there was damage in areas like Aiken and others in the South Carolina area. Either way, of those 44 systems that have directly hit the coast, only 4 made landfall as major Category 3+ hurricanes. Going to be 1893 Sea Island hurricane, Hurricane Hazel, Hurricane Gracie, and Hurricane Hugo. Knock on wood, there are no Category 5 hurricane landfalls on record for the state of South Carolina. Now, I've told people personally my experience from coming from the West Coast and not having to deal with hurricanes to now living here, outside of Helene, because it was a consistency of wind that was very nerve-wracking for us. Most of the hurricanes, by the time they get to us, are downgraded to the point that we've honestly had thunderstorms that roll through that have been worse with their straight line winds that come through than most of the hurricanes that we have seen. That's just been my personal experience. But with that said, as of 2021, Pennsylvania has been affected by approximately 53 tropical storms and hurricanes, some with winds reaching as high as 75 miles per hour. So apparently you're not free from them as well. And again, maybe you have some experience of some of these personally. Now, let's dive into the next biggest thing that has people flocking from Pennsylvania to South Carolina, specifically what I hear right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. Cost of living. Let's start with the general cost of living for the area. I pulled a couple different sites to get a better in-depth look. I had to fall back to Columbia because they didn't have options for Lexington, Blythewood, Elgin, and Irmo, and so many other places you ask about. But when we dive into housing specifically, I will give you those specific data points. But to give you an idea, one of the sites breaks it down by how much you make currently versus how much you would have to make here locally. So to give you an idea, if you make $100,000 currently in Philadelphia, you would only have to make $87,184 in Columbia, as the cost of living is considered 12.82% lower. If you make $100,000 in Pittsburgh, you only have to make $91,260 in Columbia, being that is 8.74% lower. If you make $100,000 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, you only have to make $98,249, being 1.75% lower in Colombia. Now you may ask where this breaks down, because obviously if you looked at the prices of homes, taxes, and so much more, which we will talk about, it's significantly less. So according to bankrate.com, you might see an increase in some of your groceries, but not all. Some healthcare costs, like general doctor visits, and some miscellaneous costs such as yoga classes, women's slacks, newspapers, and others. But let's dive into the specifics that I know so many have asked about, including the housing costs. But before we hit housing, we're going to talk about childcare. So according to move.org, South Carolina childcare costs $6,507 a year, on average taking up 12.5% of income. In Pennsylvania, they say it's $10,808 a year, taking up 18.7% of income. Now, with that said, one of the biggest struggles I've had clients have is finding availability. Many places had wait lists over the year as we started to grow. Now, as our growth has slightly slowed down, as interest rates have climbed, as we've seen across the country, hasn't stopped, as you saw earlier on in the statistics. It may not be as bad, but I always tell people this is definitely something to consider. Don't assume that just because there's a childcare place that you're gonna get in. Make sure to call ahead. I've had some that a couple months before they moved here got themselves on the wait list, so by the time they showed up, there was a spot available for them. Continue on, sales tax. So the tax rate in South Carolina is 6%. Counties may impose an additional 1% local sales tax if voters in that county approve that tax. Pennsylvania, sales tax is also 6%. By law, though, a 1% local tax is added to purchase made in Allegheny County and 2% added to purchases in Philadelphia. So you might be more if you're in those areas. Now let's dive into the big savings, the ones that I know make some of your eyes glow when I hear this. Property taxes. So from the research I could find in Pennsylvania, the average is right around 1.26% in Pennsylvania. To give you an idea, right here in Lexington County, South Carolina, you're looking at around a 0.57% average. Richland County, slightly higher at 0.74%, but obviously saving a lot relative to Pennsylvania. Now, with that said, let me drop two fun ones that do tend to upset people, and you've probably seen some comments online about this. Vehicle property taxes. So what I could find on one of the handy dandy Toyota sites in Pennsylvania, that in Pennsylvania, you pay a $43 annual registration for your vehicle. Sales tax would still apply that we talked about earlier when you bought the vehicle. Now, in South Carolina, we pay a yearly property tax on our vehicle that is going to be much more than what you're used to. So I pulled my last one, and to give you an idea, it was just shy of 3% of the assessed value. We have a mill rate, so it complicates the math. It's why you may hear people talk about a 4% and a 6% home property tax rate, but the mill rate brings it down to the numbers that I shared earlier, and it's the same way with the vehicle property taxes. Tell people all the time, use the county sites, as most of them have estimators on there where you can type in your estimated value and it'll give you what those taxes are going to be. Don't always rely on the home search sites that put a tax value down there, because a lot of those based on what people are currently paying. I recently did a video about this and the general cost of living of our area. Either way, don't want to get too far down that tangent. Now, with that said, going back, sales tax on the car is different. In 2017, they abandoned sales tax and switched to an infrastructure maintenance fee. You still will owe 5% of the purchase price, but it'll be no more than $500. They capped it, so savings there. Now, when they did that, they did add in a, what people like to call welcome to South Carolina fee, where there's around a $300 fee the first time you register your vehicle right here in South Carolina. And with that said, it's not just cars, it's boats, RVs, and all of the things that you have to register. And as well, one last thing to keep in mind, which kind of falls back to why I said don't rely on the home search sites when it comes to property tax. Secondary residence property taxes here in South Carolina. So the tax rates I gave you were based on primary residence. You're planning on living in that residence full time. It's not a secondary residence, it's not a rental house, it's not a vacation house, it's gonna be your full-time residence. If it is not, it's your secondary residence, you own another property that you claim as your primary residence, you're renting it out, it's a vacation home, you're gonna pay about 4 to 5 times as much in property taxes versus your primary residence. So that's why I say don't rely on those things you see online and use the tax estimator as well. This is for those that, hey, I'm gonna buy, rent it out for a little bit, and then I'll come down there in a couple years. I've had people do this, but they gotta keep these numbers in mind. Now let's dive into the housing costs. So when it comes to the median sales price and average sales price, a lot of the online sites I found do not match what our recent market report shows. And there was a lot of variance when I was looking in Pennsylvania, from low numbers to high numbers. So instead of trying to base off the stats of those, I'm gonna give you straight from our most recent local market report. And of course, then you can reference by looking back at your own neighborhood. Then you can determine how it compares. Fair? All right, let's dive in. So our most recent market report shows the average in our area being $313,000. Breaking down some of the areas that you asked me about most. Irmo came in with a median versus average. Typically I tell people median tends to be slightly less than average. Either way, Irmo, $245,000. Elgin came in at $269,000. Northeast Columbia, including neighborhoods like Lake Carolina, Blythewood, and more, came in at a median of $285,000. Forest Acres came in at $336,000. Lexington came in at $305,000. And on Lake Murray, just shy of $1 million, with the more rural areas on Lake Murray in the high 500s. Now, with that said, of course, this is the medians and the averages. What does that really equate to? I've talked about this many times before. To give you an idea though, you can easily find brand new single-family homes in Lexington and Northeast Columbia from the mid 200s and up, and townhomes even lower. I can tell you that a majority of my clients from Pennsylvania have ended up buying new construction. Now, I know many of you are taking jobs with you. You're retiring or have jobs already lined up. But many of you have asked, you have kids that may be entering the workforce, or you are looking for a job. So this may be important data to you. So according to the latest census data, the average household income in South Carolina is around $66,818. The median household income in Columbia, South Carolina is $54,095. At the same time, the median household income in Pennsylvania was $79,820. This is actually higher than the national median household income for you all. Now, unemployment rate, South Carolina is at 4.7%, with Pennsylvania at 3.6%. Now, we're not done yet. I got one more that I intentionally saved for last, but as a bonus that I wanted to throw in that attracts so many people to the area is Southern hospitality. This isn't something I can really explain into words or pull up a graph or statistics that'll give you this. You have to experience it for yourself. But the moment you land at the airport, go to the grocery store, go to a restaurant, many people tell me they just notice how much friendlier people are around here. It's the first thing clients tell me. People just seem so much nicer here. And I get it. It was refreshing coming from California. This is a bonus that I think truly helps make people feel and want to call South Carolina home. They're looking for that. They're seeking that. Again, as someone who grew up in a hustle and bustle city, much of that seems to get lost in the go, go, go lifestyle. And I know for many, it's a true breath of fresh air, especially when they're packing their bags, like we were, moving somewhere unfamiliar where you may not know anybody. And last, because I know not all of you care, and well, the comment section always lights up. But a lot of people are coming to South Carolina, let's just be honest, because it is a red state overall. To give you an idea, in 2024, Trump won 58.23% of the state to Kamala Harris at 40.36%. Now, obviously, anyone that's turned on the news knows that Pennsylvania was one of the biggest swing states in the past election. Ended up going red, with Trump winning 50.37% of the votes to 48.66% to Kamala. Now, their mayor, who many believed would have been better running mate for Kamala Harris, won the state in 2022, getting 56.5% of the vote to the Republican contender at the time at 41.7%. So it is still what most people would consider a purple state overall. Now, with that said, for those that are looking, while it is a red state, we do still have blue counties here. In 2024, about 12 counties recently voted blue, including neighboring Richland County. And to give you an idea of the discrepancy on our county lines, Lexington's vote came in with 66% voting Republican to 32% voting Democrat in 2024. Richland County, on the other chord, was 66% Democrat to 32% Republican. So opposite of each other in 2024. Now, with that said, you'll want to check out this playlist here where I actually break down all the areas we discussed in detail. Irmo, Blythewood, Lexington, Lake Murray, and more to see which area best fits you if you're first learning about this. And you might want to hurry because YouTube's probably going to cut me off pretty soon here and show you a video that you were not expecting to watch.